And welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I'm your host, Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. Now, if you're asking, what is the show all about? Well, a forum that's discussing the deeper issues and the inequities that so many people face, from systemic inequalities to pressing social problems. Our guests elaborate, providing multiple perspectives, giving us insight and better understanding, and also how to address some of these challenges. So, we invite you to stay connected to us. The Social Justice Forums starts now. Welcome back. Citizens Climate Lobby is a climate change organization that's existing to create a political will for a livable world by enabling individual breakthroughs in the exercise of personal as well as political power. Their approach to climate education is designed to create a broad, sustainable, and healthy foundation to drive climate action across all geographic regions and political inclinations. Joining me now to discuss more is the volunteer at Citizens Climate Lobby and retired Foreign Service Officer of the the U.S. Department of State, Arthur Zegelbone. And Arthur, good to have you.
Thank you, Daren. I'm happy to be here. I know that you recently had two illustrious experts on climate change from Manhattan College and from 350 New York City. So I'm honored and happy to be here as someone with much less expertise.
No, Arthur, I've got expert number 3 sharing with me today. So I'm glad to have you with me, and we're gonna have a good time. And listen, I want to thank you, first of all, for being here, but let me get at it, because when we talk about climate change, how are you seeing climate change from your perspective?
Well, your former guests mentioned a lot of the issues that we're already suffering. You also mentioned the 2006 movie that former Vice President Al Gore produced called An Inconvenient Truth. Inconvenient is the operative word. Climate change is inconvenient both for the people who are suffering from the effects of it, but also from the interests that stand to earn a great deal of money from the current situation of how we use our fossil fuels. We saw in the paper today that in Texas, people are suffering from a heat wave that's reaching 110 degrees. People are dying from it. The smoke blast that we received in New York City a couple of weeks ago is now hitting Chicago and likely to come here. And we're still suffering the effects of Super Hurricane Sandy. People who were least equipped to bounce back from it still have not bounced back. So we already know and feel the effects that climate change will bring to the world, but we face a certain resistance to doing the things that need to be done. And I feel that's where Citizens Climate Lobby comes in, is equipping citizens to stand up to that challenge.
Yeah, you bridge the gap for me, because here you are, Citizens Climate Lobby, and you're doing that work. And really, when we talk about the work, give us, from your perspective, what that work consists of in terms of making an awareness, because there's so many people, as you said, you mentioned the show before, so many people, you talk about climate change and it's in one ear and out the other, but for us, we live it on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, it's true. And I think that there's a general knowledge among people that this is the case, and yet a lot of differences of opinion about what to do. When I left the State Department and I was looking for something to do, one of the things that had impressed me from living in various countries is the countries that seem most successful to me are the ones in which citizens are engaged in affecting their own lives. And so I was looking for an organization that also took that to heart. There are 3 kinds of pieces of conventional wisdom that I go by that I think Citizens Climate Lobby also believes in. One is money talks. Another is if nothing happens, nothing happens. And the third comes from the Talmud. If not you, who? If not now, when? So Citizens Climate Lobby recognizes that there are vested interests that don't feel that they would like to inhibit the acceleration of legislation that would help us with climate. And they understand, for example, in the last year, the five largest oil companies in the United States reaped a profit of $200 billion. ExxonMobil, in the first quarter of this year alone, just the first quarter, the first 3 months, reaped a profit of $11 billion. That money's great for their investors. Some of it is shared with society, but they are producing a product that in the long run, we know, and even in the short run, even today, is hurting us. So what do we do in the face of that kind of power? In this country, money and power go together. We understand that. In Congress, among our congressmen, although many are of goodwill and come to Washington with the idea that they would like to change things for the better, a lot of their time is spent on guaranteeing or trying as well as they can to guarantee that they will be reelected. For that, they need money. The Supreme Court agreed in 2010, had a decision called Citizens United that allows corporations to spend unlimited funds, not directly to candidates, but to political action committees and to help candidates advertise themselves. They advertise themselves in order to get votes. So the philosophy in Citizens Climate Lobby is, you want to see the votes? You better talk to the voters. And there are 420 chapters of Citizens Climate Lobby around the country, 150 in other countries as well. And their primary mission is to go to their congressmen as constituents and say, here's what I want you to do. Perhaps you're being supported by other interests that would like you to do otherwise, but here's what I expect from you. Yeah. And so far, we feel some traction.
Well, you know, Arthur, when I think about the work that you do, I know that programs and workshops are also a part of that component. You talk about the education and really getting out to the political forefront, talking to legislators, elected officials, making them aware about the situation with the climate. But also on the backside of that, you do spend time in programs and workshops with your clientele. Talk to us about the workshops and the programs that are going on to further your cause.
Yeah, I've been involved with other nonprofits. I'm also very interested in politics, and I've worked with some political nonprofits, also some arts nonprofits. This is the best organized nonprofit I've ever been engaged with, and they have decided that they want to educate the volunteers who work for them, the several thousand people who work for them, so that they can go to their representative with confidence and say, here's what I'd like you to do, here's why. I know that you've heard some arguments to the contrary, and here are some counter arguments. We recently, a week ago, had a national conference in Washington, D.C. 900 people showed up from around the country. It was as diverse as you could imagine. There were, of course, as there are in a lot of nonprofits, a lot of retired people like myself, but also high school students, college students, a diversity of ethnic backgrounds, conservatives and liberals. And one of the things that I like about Citizens Climate Lobby is that there is room for respectful disagreement. Not everybody agrees on every point. It's a complex issue with lots of ramifications that needs to be talked out. And the volunteers who work with Citizens Climate Lobby find it necessary to know both sides of every issue, so that when they do go to a congressman or congresswoman, to a congressional representative, they have the goods.
I'm smiling because here it is. I'm thinking that we got a lot of partisan politics going on in Washington, D.C., as you know, but you just talked about the diversity that you have. You talked about how you're able to navigate that and to be able to effectuate change, and also where it is, given the fact that, hey, we don't always agree. How do you get that? To translate to Washington is one. That's another show all by itself. But how are you able to actually achieve that within the organization? Because I think, if you really do the homework here, it sets the tone for a lot of other areas in life where we see diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of ethnicity, diversity of all of that, and still be able to come out and get the bottom line done.
You're absolutely right, Daren. I mean, this right now, more than ever in the history of this country, is a critical issue that we need to get by. We're at a period in history where, and it's not the first time, we've had other disruptions to American democracy, but there are threats to our democracy. My feeling is, particularly from attending something like Citizens Climate Lobby Convention in Washington, that most Americans are not extremists, but somehow the extremes get the most attention. Some of it, and I have to say this to you, although I do believe that BronxNet is an exception because you're bringing in so many speakers that are able to speak their minds. But the media, to some extent, has uplifted the extremes so that the impression of an extreme country, extreme politics being the norm has taken over when I think it's not.
Yeah, not offended here. There's good media, there's bad media. We're glad that we can fall on the public television side where we can bring diversity of thought and a voice. And sometimes that's exactly, what's needed. Is we need to have that diversity and respect people's opportunity, right? I mean, you're not going to always agree, and we have to learn how to just agree to agree and sometimes agree to disagree. From your look, what should we, the public, be paying attention to in this moment at this time?
Well, the prime issue that Citizens Climate Lobby is promoting in Congress is the idea of a carbon fee and dividend. There is an act that is being put forward in Congress by Congressman Carbajal from California called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. What this would do would allow the government to charge extraction industries, oil, coal, and gas, at the wellhead, a certain fee for the amount of pollution that this substance will create in the world. And that fee will be distributed among American citizens, in some part to counteract the result of the fee, which will be to raise the price of oil and possibly raise some other prices, but there will be an equal distribution as a dividend to American citizens. It's the one issue, although we realize that there are other possible solutions to these problems, Citizens Climate Lobby has decided to focus on just a few issues because it makes it more powerful to bring that to our legislators. Along with carbon fee and dividend, they're very interested in healthy forests and in urban reforestry. There's the concept of tree equity, which I'm very interested in. I live in Riverdale, and one of the reasons I live here is that there are more trees than people. And it would be nice to see that around the Bronx and the city. And in fact, trees are good for the climate. They're pushing building electrification, e-vehicles, heat pumps in buildings that will use less fossil fuels. And the other idea that's being pushed now is permitting reform. That is to make the process of permitting new energy resources to speed up the process that the government has of permitting them. It can take up to 5 years to allow new pipeline, for example, or new electrical wires to go through the country. The permitting will be done, Citizens Climate Lobby insists, with local input. So there are those four, one major and then three other issues that we have been bringing consistently to Congress. In Washington, there were 400 meetings with congressional offices to talk about these issues and to persuade members of Congress that their constituents were serious about seeing them do something.
When you talk about Congress, talk about elected officials and this particular matter, when it comes to climate change, when it talks about green space, how attentive are we finding our elected officials to be? I mean, we talked about before how when Al Gore was sounding the alarm, it seems as though a lot of people didn't give that ear or wrote them off. Now we're looking years later, we're saying, hey, you know what? Former vice president was right. There's some things we really need to be paying attention to. But when it comes to those who are elected right now, what kind of response are you getting from people as you continue to lift up your voice?
You're right, Daren. That was the Al Gore movie came out 17 years ago, with some very clear scientific evidence that this is what we were facing. I do think it's human to put off solutions unless you're feeling the pain. I think we are feeling the pain now. I do think there's responsiveness there, but there is responsiveness in which there is real action that has a real result, and there is lip service. I think almost everybody in Congress, I think there are very few now who are denying that climate change is real. I think there are very few now who are saying that this is not caused by human action, by what we're spewing into the atmosphere. But there are members of Congress now. I mean, the current Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a whole host of climate-friendly funding that is a part of the act. The act was done as budget reconciliation, which is a political kind of sleight of hand that means it can't be filibustered, and it was passed 100% by Democrats, and not all Democrats. There are now members of Congress who are working to take some of the aspects of that act apart, challenging them, trying to push them back, because they know and they are supported by interests who are negatively affected by climate-friendly action. So Congress is at least embarrassed to say, no, there's no climate problem when people are dying in Texas. They have been disproven so many times about the idea that there is a human element to climate change, but they're hoping that there's little attention to the specifics of what they're doing. We just had a primary election here in New York City. Primaries are very important, particularly in New York, because the Democrat in New York City always wins the election. The primary is the only election that makes a difference. About 10% of the voting population voted. I don't know if it makes a difference, the vote itself, but I do know that politicians take a look to see how active are my constituents, how closely are they paying attention to what I do. And this is what I would recommend to anybody who says, I don't think things are going well. The more local your representative, city council, state assembly, the House of Representatives, President of the United States, don't bother writing to him. But for the representatives who depend on your vote, listen to you. And I suggest to people that that's the most satisfying route you can take to trying to make a difference.
Yeah. Arthur Zegelbone, we'll have to leave it there. And if you're just joining us, he is a volunteer at Citizens Climate Lobby and also retired Foreign Service Officer for the United States Department of State. And we thank you for your service and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Daren. It was a pleasure.
Great conversation. Of course, glad to have you. All righty. We are taking a quick break, but guess what? We'll be back with more right after this.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
You know it's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been running code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I'm more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. Stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
According to a report from the Muslim Community Network, between the year 2019 and 2022, a staggering 76% of Muslims in New York City witnessed a hate crime, with 49% becoming victims themselves. These incidents begin as early as elementary school. The report emphasizes the urgent need to address these challenges and create a more inclusive society. Joining me now and sharing more is the founder of Muslim Media Corporation, the publisher of Muslim Community Report, and the CEO of halalfinder.com, Sheikh Musa Drammeh. And it's good to have you. And we've had you on a lot of different platforms. I think it's the first time we had you here on social justice. But thank you for coming and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm back home.
Yes, glad to have you back home and glad to have this conversation. And not glad for the content of the conversation, but glad to have the conversation. We talk about these numbers. They continue to rise when it comes to Muslim hate. More and more people seem to, join in on the bandwagon, if you will. A lot of this is caused by extremists, and some are called by radicalists right here in the United States. What are you saying?
Yes, well, there are two sides to it. Number one, we condemn any kind of crime, whether it's a biased crime or just regular crime. And obviously, crimes against Muslims have not been a welcoming news since 9/11, because unfortunately we have a lot of ignorance, around the world that identify Muslims with the perpetrators of the heinous crime of 9/11. That's one thing. However, the other side of it is that when it comes to crimes against religiosity, Muslims are not the top priority for the hate crime committers. The Jewish community still, experience the brunt of crimes against, a group because of their religiosity. Here in New York City, we're very fortunate for the fact that even though, the Muslim Network did the report, but if you look at the numbers, it's not as high as it is being made to be alarming. Overall hate crimes in New York City dropped this year, including, Islamophobia or crimes against Muslims. So yes, we should be open arms, in preventing further deterioration of our communities, but it is not at the rate that some organizations made it to be.
Okay, so the numbers are lower. What does this mean? We got more loving people, or what's this going on?
Yeah. What it means is that we have to give credit to the enlightened elected officials and the diverse law enforcement communities. If you take NYPD, for example, today NYPD reflected the true nature of the city. You have one of the largest concentration of Muslim law enforcement who are now serving in the NYPD. And you name it, country-wise, language-wise, culture-wise, they represent it. And because of that, in the last several years, the ignorance among New Yorkers about each other has dissipated because we became pretty much one beautiful, diverse community. Eric Adams, for example, the current mayor, campaigned on 5 borough New York City, went to every neighborhood, meet with every group, and because of that, his policy reflects that inclusiveness, and Muslims are benefiting from that. So we are more enlightened with the beauty of diversity now than before, and Muslims among others, are the beneficiary of this newly enlightenment that we've acquired. Right. So the bottom line is that, yes, we should cry for any type of hate crimes or any crime whatsoever, but I'm here to tell you that Muslims are not the worst victims of hate crimes yet.
Even though you're not the worst, still feeling the pain, right?
Absolutely.
And the pain is real. What's it like, from an insider perspective, living in the Muslim community, knowing that how the world perceives, knowing that how people perceive sometimes right here in this very city?
I hold so many forums. I'm a panelist to so many universities and interfaith, intergroups. And I always ask the audience, when do you think Islam arrived in the United States? People said, oh, the slaves bring in the West Africans, this and that. And I said, no. Islam arrived on 9/11. If you take it from that perspective, then you can reason with the mentality that most people who are not Muslim have. Because when they see Muslims, with the ugliness and the painfulness of 9/11, it reminds them of the ugliest part of humanity. Therefore, once you come up from that perspective, you can reason with them. You can understand their ignorance, their fear, and their justified concern before they get to know you. So my advice to Muslims is that we came from a very broken society, colonial society. You recently came from Africa. You see how broken, ethnic, tribal, religion, you name it. And that brokenness, unfortunately, sometimes we carry it to the West, and when we do that, we pretty much reinforce the stereotype that other people have about us. So I am more harsh on Muslims, being those who embrace diversity and welcome the new environment in which they adopted than anti-Muslims, So I'm always contrarian to many issues, as you can tell. That's why I'm not alarmed about Islamophobia yet, because overall, Muslims are not, again, the biggest victims.
We identified the problem, right? But let's talk a little bit about solutions. You've been at the forefront of solution because you've had peace talks.
Yes.
You've had awareness.
Yeah.
What do you feel has been the success of the work that you're doing in terms of bridging that gap? If we want to talk about lower numbers, gotta give you some credit there, right? Because you're out on the battlefield. There's a lot of other people who are like you who are out on the battlefield, really having these conversations and doing some things. So what are some of the things that are being done right now to bring that awareness and also to mitigate these numbers?
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you asked this question. Immediately after 9/11, as you can remember clearly, the Muslim world went into hiding. Muslim leaders, Muslim scholars, imams were not talking. And my Santa said, no, we got to fill the void. People are concerned and scared, and they don't know who to trust, where to go, what to believe. They don't know Muslims. We said we're going to open 24 hours, 7 days a week as an information retrieval center. Let the whole world come and ask us, and we did that. And if you remember, the first couple of months after 9/11, whenever you see these hardened criminals on one side of your TV screen, you see me on the other side, challenging every single narrative that they're peddling, every single conceivable, verses or justification to violence and hate and extremism. I was there challenging it. PBS or CBS News, Channel 2, came to the Bronx and went to Brooklyn and visited some of the Islamic centers, came to our center, 24 hours, 7 days a week open. No security guard, no alarm, nothing, everything open. And when everywhere else, they had these big guys guarding their doors and whatever. Then the question was, what is the difference between the Muslims in the Bronx and the rest of the Muslims? And you know what the difference was? Prior to 9/11, we had implemented the seed of being part of the community. We're Muslims, but we're not different. We're immigrants, but we're not different. So together we work to cultivate an environment that is, conducive for peaceful coexistence. And that seed now, from 22 years ago until today, is the only solution. we are one human family. We may come from different backgrounds, we may look different, we may speak different, but at the end of the day, we are one human family. Now, we don't have to agree on everything, but at the same time, we do not have to be the burden or liability to one another because of these differences. And that is exactly the solution that we have germinated and continue to cultivate it, and nothing else.
We talk a lot with people who are activists, whether it's, a Black Lives Matter activist, it could be somebody from the Latinx community, it could be the LGBTQ community. One of the things that happens is they have a tendency of saying, I get laryngitis because I've been talking a lot and nobody's listening, so I lose my voice. What do you feel? Do you feel now that the people are listening more? Are people more heightened? I mean, I think after George Floyd, we talked about, this show was birthed after George Floyd. I think when people start to see things, now a mindset is like, okay, maybe everything people are talking about isn't so far-fetched. It's real. Are people catching on?
Some people are catching on, but the problem also when you have these organizations and activists that are peddling either race or gender or other issues, the problem has always been monetizing it. We take, public's feeling and we try to package it and monetizing it. And Black Lives Matter is a perfect example. Right now we're discovering that, the hype, you get the whole world condemning what is happening. Money is being sent. Where is the money? And then many, many groups that have championed equality, race, all these things. The problem has always been the language does not correspond to the real agenda that they are, promoting. And they're not practicing what they're preaching or walking their talk. This including my own religion. The organizations that are doing 200 people survey, 300 people survey, and said 78% of the Americans don't like Muslims. But you only talk to 200 people. All you're trying to do is justify your organization's existence and funding, including this Islamophobia type of thing. Muslims are not the biggest victims. And also when it comes to race, there are a lot of people who promote race, and they completely ignore that the majority of people pro-equality are not even, black. If you are, let's say, pro-black, majority of your supporters not black. So are you discounting them? So this is why a lot of times we keep talking and people not listening, because we're not really making a lot of sense, because we keep recycling the same exact thing. Last but not least, after Amadou Diallo's killing, by the NYPD, those opportunists took full advantage of it, and everybody. And at the end of the day, I wrote to all of them, and I said, one more march about Amadou Diallo, we will expose you. Because I knew the inner workings of what was going on. I attended the meetings, I knew about the money issue, all these things. The language never ever met the real objective of seeking justice for Amadou Diallo. And unfortunately, this is the problem that we're having. That's why I am not at all alarmed about a lot of the statistics, because the numbers don't make sense a lot of times, or even if they do make sense, they're all monetizing it for their benefit.
What are some of the initiatives that you got going on that maybe people can pay attention to? We don't have a whole show. We can have a whole show, but give me a couple.
I got you. Our latest initiative is that, health and wellness. We live, let's take the Bronx. We're part of New York City. I say to elected officials, we're part of New York City, for God's sake. How come we are last in all things good and first in all things bad? When it comes to health, education, poverty, every single thing we are last. We got to change it, because Bronx is not a county that has all the social elements of being bad. We just made it bad. So we have now created an organization called National Center for Health Equity. And our goal here is to remove Bronx from being the 62nd county in health metrics and raise it up to the top 10. We can do it because Bronx is the greenest county. And to join the movement, you got to talk to us because we cannot continue to die from ailments and sicknesses and disease that are caused by junk foods and sugary drinks and sedentary lifestyles and all kinds of things that we can avoid. There is not a single thing that is killing us, including cancer and diabetes, high blood pressure, that cannot be prevented. All of them are preventable with healthy lifestyle. And our latest campaign is healthy lifestyle. We call it a lifestyle lifespan. You look at the hip-hop community, you know, global community, but now young guys are dying because of unhealthy lifestyle. So we can change it. So we're promoting lifestyle lifespan, which is a New York healthy lifestyle campaign.
Before we get out of here, I got to give you the opportunity to share with our viewers how can people get in touch with you, what, if they want to join the initiative, be a part of this movement, how to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Social media, lifestyle, lifespan. You know, you can get there, or you go to our website, which is nationalhealthequity.org, nationalhealthequity.org, and my telephone number is 718-822-5555, 718-822-5555.
Sheikh, I got to ask you, as a Muslim living here, knowing a lot of those who reside in the Muslim community, is there still a sense of fear on the part of many people who are Muslim, given the fact of all these things that we've talked about, or do you feel that people are walking with a sense of more freedom?
No. Again, there are different camps. You know, the more enlightened Muslims feel harm, they feel safe and secure. But those who are getting their information from small circles and, you know, control, communications, of course, they're fearful because, unfortunately, we have these global satellites that give different cultures and what is happening. Perfect example, what happened in Palestine, Israel. You know, the way you see it in the Arabic Muslim lands is completely different from the way you see it in the Western lands. So if these people are staying in their homes and watching what is happening in Palestine, Kashmir, and some other part of the Muslim world, or watching a Muslim woman being attacked because of hijab, whatever, that's what they believe permeates the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But the enlightened Muslims, no problem, they feel home safe and secure.
I'll leave it there. Mm-hmm. Sheikh Musa, Drammeh, good to have you.
Thank you, absolutely.
All righty. Mm-hmm. Got to take a quick break, but guess what? We'll have more, I should say, on the Social Justice Forum right after this.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut, the one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink. Or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking. Now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed. Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Where did the time go? Somehow I lost all those years. Where did the time go? I don't know how I got here. Or how did I get here?
You've done the hard part. You quit smoking. Now do the easy part and get scanned for lung cancer. If you smoked, you may still be at risk, but early detection could save your life. Talk to your doctor and learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Go. Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the
And we are back. Rising Ground as an organization is providing children, adults, and families with the resources and skills needed to help them rise above adversity and positively direct their lives. The organization has been at the forefront of evolving community leads, as well as becoming a leader in utilizing result-driven, evidence-based practices. Here with us now is Rising Ground CEO Alan Mucatel and Senior Vice President of Diversity, Fairness, and Belonging, Travis Rodgers. And welcome both.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here.
In person, right? Talk to me, Alan, a little bit about what Rising Ground is all about. I gave a little intro, but you can take us a little deeper.
Sure. I think we're a little bit of an unknown force here in New York City. We're a large multi-service human service organization with over 100 different programs in 80 plus different locations across the borough, all the boroughs of the city. And what we're doing is helping people to move upward and forward in their lives by providing them with a solid foundation from which to grow. And we do that in a number of different ways in a number of different programs, whether it's on the child welfare side, foster care prevention, supporting survivors of intimate partner violence, helping young people who have come to this country unaccompanied as they settle into the United States. So a wide range of services directed to lots of New Yorkers.
Travis, a little bit about the work you do.
Oh, thank you for that question. So I run our Diversity, Fairness, and Belonging department here at Rising Ground. And it pours into our staff, into the people that we serve, in that we represent a large swath of people across all races, genders, gender identities, socioeconomic statuses. But the more important thing is that our staff actually reflects the people that we work with and that we serve. So there's a better understanding of how we can provide them with better services.
Yeah. When we talk about the community, obviously a lot of different needs, right? So let's unpack a little bit. Let's talk about youth and youth development. I know that's work that you do as well. Talk about how we're impacting youth here.
So let me give you one example where we have a very large presence working with young people, and that is supporting individuals who are identified as runaway and homeless youth. And at Rising Ground, we run a number of transitional independent living programs scattered across New York, including several here in the Bronx. And those provide longer-term residence for individuals as they begin to plan their future towards adulthood and settling in obtaining employment and obtaining housing. We also run in Queens, the drop-in center, so that's working directly with young people who are on the streets. In Brooklyn, we run a mental health hub, again, for young people who are on the streets. So we have a very large presence in supporting a truly vulnerable sector of young people here in the city. We do a lot of other work with young people as well, but that's one area.
Well, you take a look at those particular areas. Are you seeing any numbers that are continuing to rise in population?
Yes. So one of the issues that we face here in New York is we know we have a large homeless population in general, right? And that's being influenced as well as individuals who are coming here as asylum seekers too. So there's a lot of stressors, of course, on the system. Our focus is on young people, and there's a continuous need to support them because those, unfortunately, the dynamics that play out for a number of young people remain the same. There are challenges around acceptance with their family members. There are challenges around not getting the supports they feel they needed in their home life, and that continues, sadly, to bring young people to the streets.
Let me walk into your ballpark for a minute. So if I'm coming in as a young person, right, and I'm dealing with the issues of life, I come to this organization and I see somebody who looks like me. How much does that make a difference?
It makes a huge difference. We know that young people connect better with people that look like them, particularly if you talk about black males. They connect better with older black men who can guide them along their way, really reinforce some of the educational needs that they have, or really get them off of the streets and provide them with services, or that language connection. Having someone that speaks the same language as you, from the same dialect, goes a long way in really crossing some of those barriers that might prevent some struggles there. And then as an organization, we pour into doing anti-bias and anti-racism training. So even though I look just like you, our shared experiences might not always be the same, or I might be packing some other things inside of me that I've taken on from the system. So we as an organization do all the training to help you get out of that piece so that you can better serve the people that we work with.
Yeah. It's almost like when we talk about Rising Ground, it's really digging way deep beneath the surface, right? Because there's a lot of surface things that people are dealing with, but at the same time, there's really some real highly, deeply entrenched things that our community is dealing with from, you talk about youth, talk about education, things like that. On the educational front, what are you seeing?
Well, I think what you're touching on here is just the notion of trauma that is really a part of so many experiences, whether or not you're talking about racial-related trauma, sure, poverty, mental health concerns, poor housing situations, lack of access to other services. So there's a whole array of challenges that whether we're talking about young people or families or single adults are experiencing, and of course, an overlay of poverty that elevates the concerns that we have. And so we are seeing people who are coming to us with very significant needs, and what we try to do is help them. First, we meet them where they're at. We look to support them in concrete ways, and then also provide them with the skills that allow them, in whatever programs we're talking about, allow them to move forward in their lives.
Yeah, sensitivity. I mean, trauma is a big teacher for a lot. Let me hear from you, both of you. How have you been impacted as an organization since COVID? I mean, COVID has had detrimental effects on a lot of organizations. What's it been like for you?
I'll take that one. Travis fortunately wasn't with us for the COVID period, so he got to miss that experience.
Well, I give a different perspective.
But he has a different perspective for sure. Well, first, we know that there is, especially for young people, but also for adults, there is a huge mental health residual component that we are experiencing across society, right? We know people are carrying with them tremendous built-up anxieties, phobias, just really, we are starting to see, we see it on the streets. Listen, I'm a native New Yorker, and we are seeing things today that we weren't seeing as much, perhaps. Maybe they were always there, maybe they just became more clear to us, but I also think that they've been elevated as a result of COVID. We also are seeing a different work environment that we had before, right? There's lots of tensions about where people want to work, how they want to work, and that is impacting the human service, social service sector as well, and we're no different in that regard. So we're trying to accommodate individual needs, not individual needs, but accommodate collective needs of employees. We want to be a competitive place to work, and yet a lot of our work, the very nature of human services, is to be directly present with somebody. So being remote doesn't work always so well in that case. So that's a huge challenge for our world.
Absolutely.
And I would say, in my time here at Rising Ground, just this week we had staff going through undoing racism training, and we also have a racial trauma group that's going through training as well. And they've highlighted some of the things that Alan pointed out as far as the mental health issues that our youth are facing, and some of the systemic oppression that occurred that kind of bubbled up and boiled over as a result of COVID. And so they were in their meeting today just really unpacking the systems and where we fit in the systems and how we can intervene for our students, while also still working through the things that they had to work through during COVID. So we have to remember that our staff has their own challenges as a result of COVID, while also trying to accommodate them and be competitive in the workforce.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's amazing because the dynamic has shifted. You know, let's just be honest. The dynamic has shifted. It's a hard job to provide services. Hard job sometimes to meet the needs of that have changed, that have forced all of us to have to really, change. What do you think for yourself in the organization that you're making the most impact?
I would say that we make our most impact in the direct spot, right? That our work is, I mean, of course, when you sit in the position of a CEO, you're thinking about the collective impact of your organization. And the truth is the impact of this organization is vast and impressive. We're supporting close to 25,000 individuals at any given moment. So a really large impact. But what does that really mean? It's the aggregation of individual engagement, individual advancement, individual achievements. And I think we make tremendous impact in those one-on-one moments. And they can be somebody learning to address a challenge they had in their life, somebody improving a relationship that has gone wrong, somebody acquiring some skill that's going to allow them to be more gainfully employed. There's any number of things that happen along the way, but that's, I think, where we are. I think it's the thing that we're most proud of. And I would say one of the things we do when we start meetings at our organization, we always ask this following question: can somebody share a success? Just one success. Why? Because it always roots us, it grounds us back in why the reason we're doing this work is to help the individuals that we're supposed to support.
Yeah, success makes a whole lot of difference. I mean, I think it enhances the work that you do, but at the same time, it also is a point that you've made the difference in the life of somebody. And when we talk about, the changing economy. We talk about, a changing workforce. What has been the hardest thing for you to adapt to in all of this?
Well, I think part of the challenge for us today is, like many employers, is to find people who are drawn to our work. I want to say this, for somebody who really wants to have a direct impact working with, whether it's young people, with adults, or with families, if that's work that is of interest to you, then a place like Rise and Ground can actually deliver that experience to you in the way that you want it to happen. So I think one of the challenges for us is to connect with individuals who want to do that work. We can then support them and provide them with the right environment, the training, the encouragement, the camaraderie that allow them to grow and thrive in a career that can help other people.
The conversation, when we talk about diversity and equity and fairness, right? This is a conversation that we know has been ongoing for years, right? Sometimes I sit in the seat and say, how hard is it for somebody to just, get on board? You understand what it is. But from your lens, what's it like having the conversation, and what's it like as you look through the lens of other people who are saying, maybe some for the first time, like, I didn't get it? That's
a great question. So you have to take a multi-pronged approach, right? It's a little bit of whack-a-mole. You have to have the patience to really sit down and explain to people what the issues are. I like to make numbers personal for people, so I create the big picture, and then boil it down to a personal story, either my own or someone else that I know, so that people can truly get it. You have to have investment from your organization. Lots of times in the DEI space, after George Floyd, a lot of DEI executives were hired, but the funding there for the positions didn't exist, right? And so it makes the job even harder to kind of squeeze blood from a rock, right? So I always tell folks that want to get involved in my profession, when you start talking to employers, actually talk to them about what the budget might be for your department, and what the expectations are. Can we set tangible outcomes, and what the overall goal and mission of the organization actually is, right? As for an organization like Rise and Ground, it's made it a lot easier because I have support from leadership. I have a staff that really truly cares about the work and wants to get better at providing the services. And also, a lot of our staff is willing to recognize that they have a personal experience that kind of shaped their lens, but they also have an experience that's affected by systems. And how can they split those two things apart to really analyze what's going on, and how can they navigate that to provide the best services possible for our folks?
The advantage of having this particular part of your administration, having diversity, equity, fairness, what has it been like for you?
So Travis has been a long time in coming. He doesn't know that, obviously, because he wasn't there for that part. There was a lot of work that our organization has been doing for a number of years in the diversity, fairness, and belonging space, all driven initially, before he's arrived, by volunteers, right? All of us deciding that this is really an important thing for an organization like us. 93% of the people who work for us are people of color. The vast majority of the people who we support are people of color. We represent a lot of people in the LGBTQ community. We have a whole array of what diversity means. But now having him is to have a thought partner, to have a thought leader, to have somebody who brings a professional experience to the efforts that we've been putting forward is wonderful. It's really joyful to me personally, to get to interact with him, to have conversations, to poke challenges where they should be had, is really wonderful. And I think that while I don't know that Rise will be able to change, some of these issues. All of these issues are so big, right? They are a true. Racism is a cancer that is embedded in our makeup, sadly, and it's not going to be fixed tomorrow. Right. But what I think we can do is we can take this one organization, invest really heavily about trying to change approaches, minds, actions, and we can make a difference here, and we can also be, I guess, a great example beyond our immediate impact.
I want to ask a question. We talked about runaway youth earlier. Certainly we can't divulge everything, but is there a particular thing that we're hearing from our youth when we talk about runaway youth and services? Or somebody says, why are kids running away from home? Or is there anything that we can learn, we can glean?
Of course, every individual's situation is different for them, and particular for them. But generally, It's about communication and understanding, right? A willingness to listen to young people, to acknowledge the strengths and capacities they have, and the voice that they're expressing. Mm-hmm. And I think when that doesn't happen well, it leads to frictions, and those frictions then sometimes can take a life of their own.
Right. Yeah. I want to kind of let you out because when we talk about this, right, you talk about that at that level with young people, CI mushrooms, and now we've got a lot of societal issues mm-hmm. that are just based on lack of communication mm-hmm. or being heard or being that. But, congratulations for the work that you do. If somebody's out there watching and saying, listen, how do I get connected? What do they do?
Very easy. www.risingground.org. You can find information about the services that we provide. You can find information about employment opportunities. You can learn about becoming a foster parent. We welcome you and your support and engagement in our work in every possible way.
Yeah. And what kind of conversations are you having nowadays with the employees?
It's a great question, because today we talked about racism and systemic racism and actually boiled it down to actual examples from lived experiences involving schools, right? And so how the school system's operating as a form of oppression for kids of color. That was a conversation today. A conversation tomorrow that we're having about in a DEI world is about inclusivity and how do we create an atmosphere at work where we're inclusive to our non-binary colleagues, right? And so there's just multiple conversations that need to be had about inclusion, acceptance, affirming people, and really pressing forward in this work.
Yeah, I hear a lot. One of the things that it's a pet peeve of mine. I always get irked by people saying, "We gotta have conversations, and then there's never a space for it, right? Or we say, "Oh, we need to talk," and we never get around to talking, right? But then at the end of the day,
we have a lot of those conversations at Rising Ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have an anti-racism working group that Alan sits on, that many people of our leadership sit on, and they talk about policies and practices as it pertains to race and equity in the organization.
I would just say it's important to have a space for conversation, and then it's also important to take conversation and try to make it into action.
Yeah, that's what
And that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, we could have a conversation until we're blue in the face, but if there's no action behind the conversation.
Not all action has to be huge, right? You can sometimes it's best to just start, what is the low-hanging fruit? Let's make some little progress. Let that progress become an example about what's possible. Let's learn from that and do the next thing. And so one of the things that is wonderful about having Travis join us is he's got the same approach that many of our leaders do, which is this has got to become real.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to walk the walk.
Yeah, I teach this in leadership circles that I'm in. I say you celebrate small victories, you have small victories.
All the small ones.
And then guess what? You have large ones, and then you get to a place where you can do some great big things. But you guys are doing the great and the small. Thank you so much for being with us, Al and Travis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you.
All right.
Well, listen, everybody, I want to let you know that that comes to the end of our show today. Hope that you actually enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice and Anti-Violence Forum. Now, if you want to rewatch this week's edition, do this. Recapture your cable cast right here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join in on the conversation and actually present your point of view, well, visit our social media at BronxNet TV. We tell you, join us next week. We'll continue to elevate the discussion, also bring some further awareness across the globe on the issues that matter. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, saying take care. God bless. You've been watching the Social Justice and Anti-Violence Forum.